Welcome to the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, a place for the strong, sensitive spiritual seeker to recognize the perfection of your human journey as a bridge both the emotional and spiritual worlds through proven and grounded frameworks that support you to live in the wholeness you already are. For over the past 2 decades, I have supported people from all around the world, as well as Fortune 500 companies, to dissolve the divisions within them and live with greater empowerment and love. This podcast is an exploration of the paradoxes that befuddle us as we live our lives being both human and divine. Together, you and I, along with other experts, will navigate integrating psychology and spirituality, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the darkness and the light, to create greater sacred union from within. I believe through your remembering that you are innately divine, that you will allow yourself to more openly shine. So let's get to it, because your unique light is needed more than ever. Hello and welcome back, my strong, spiritual, and sensitive people. Welcome to episode number 6, where we are going to be talking about Mary Magdalene and her invitation for us to emotionally grow and evolve. And I'm so excited about this topic because Mary Magdalene, first of all, has meant so much to me. She came through to me when it was my own time for a deeper evolution and growth, not just spiritually, but emotionally. And so I think a lot of times she gets talked about from a spiritual lens, which makes sense. She's Mary Magdalene. What I'm going to be tying in today, that I hope it connects for you, is the emotional piece that I believe her and Yeshua, which is Jesus's Hebrew name, what I believe they were actually trying to teach us. So in order for me to convey this information, I've got to go back into some history about Christianity. And this is some history about traditional Christianity, as well as ancient Christianity that is not the Christianity that we know today. And we'll discuss some of these differences and why this matters, and why I believe Mary Magdalene is coming forward now for all of us. She is not just someone that is coming through for women. She is there for whatever your gender is, and because there is a divine feminine element in all of us, and this needs to be brought forward for many reasons, which we're going to get into today, and really for our emotional evolution and health. So let's start with what we know about Mary Magdalene through traditional text. In traditional Christianity, we know that she was one of the most faithful of the apostles, and she was considered an apostle, especially because she was there throughout Jesus's crucifixion and afterwards. She was there. She was a part of the burial. And then afterwards, of course, she was the first one to witness his resurrection. And that is why she has this name, Apostle of the Apostles. So according to the canonical Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Mary Magdalene is present at the crucifixion of Jesus. And while all these other disciples fled because they were scared for their lives, we have her, we have Mother Mary, another Mary, who stay at the scene. And I'm going to share with you more why I think that is. Yes, it was a part of her faith, but I think there was something deeper going on there. And she was devoted to staying next to Yeshua's side through this hardship that he was facing, despite her life also being threatened. And she stayed the course with Jesus, which I think is going to be vital. And so, again, she's the first witness at the empty tomb. She knew where Jesus was laid to rest. She saw the empty tomb. She was the first to encounter the risen Jesus and to proclaim his resurrection. And so this is all in traditional Christianity, right? And so, what we can start to take just from this is that Jesus, Yeshua, I'm going to interchange them, is his revolutionary approach toward the divine as something that is accessible to all of us, and inclusive to all, especially people who were traditionally marginalized due to gender, ethnicity, moral standing, health issues, you name it, right? And we know from many of the canonical texts that there were followers of Jesus, even other apostles, who had a hard time with Jesus' inclusiveness. It was because this was a big deal for their time, and the Jewish religion that they were brought up in, and political reasons, because women had no say. And so it was, and especially around spirituality, so that Mary Magdalene is the one to witness and proclaim that this resurrection has occurred, has such a profound significance that I feel like it just gets brushed over, especially during the Easter holiday and when we're reading a lot of these texts. That there was something very important and significant to her being there. And so what I invite us to understand is that, and going back to the sense of inclusiveness that Jesus really demonstrated, even in traditional texts, is that just like today, there's different sects of Christianity, Catholics, Protestant, Lutheran, Mormon, you name it. Back in ancient times, after Jesus's resurrection, there were different groups of that practiced Christianity. And so we can see already, even from traditional texts, that there's going to be groups that honored Jesus's inclusivity and others who don't, right? And so for those who didn't, they're they're just living in the environment that they're living in. That was the time, where women were just they were subordinates, right? They did not have much say, and they were really and they certainly weren't people that were considered educated to be able to have spiritual conversations, theological discussions, right? And so here we have this revolutionary aspect of what Jesus is teaching, which I'm going to get into more. And we have people that are like, all right, like, I love what Jesus has to say, but really, does he have to include all these other groups of people that we normally wouldn't? And so here's my sense of what's going on. If after Jesus's death, you have this love for Jesus, which I can love and appreciate, and you so want these teachings out, you have this dilemma, right? Of the more I can make this palatable to others, where they can digest his message, the easier it is it's going to convert others to this message, right? And so to do that, are we willing to cut out the feminine? Are we willing to cut out what the feminine brought to early Christianity? And some of these groups decided that was the best way to go. And I don't believe they knew or understood the ramifications that this would have on us 2,000 years later, right? We also have to understand that because Christians were persecuted right after Jesus's crucifixion, is that Christians they were living in fear, right? And they had to worship in kind of these small secretive communities. And these communities were worship based on oral traditions. And these oral traditions differed based on who was going to be leading some of these groups. So again, we're going to have people that are all about the inclusivity and others who struggle with it, right? And so based on that, it's really recognizing that none of the gospels were written by anyone who actually met Jesus. So they're accounts from people who met Jesus, right? But the actual gospels, whether it's canonical or not, were at least one or two generations separated from actual witnesses, right? And so here we have Christians hiding and worshiping, and they have their different beliefs, they have their different sects of their version of Christianity. And Rome is persecuting all Christians. Then the fourth century comes around, and Rome is seeing like this is not working well for us to persecute all these Christians. How can we start to bring them into the Roman fold, right? The Roman ways. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to have authorized text. These become the canonical texts that that are going to be approved. So you can imagine which ones are going to be approved. Those that uplift the feminine, probably not in the fourth century, right? And so in order for Christianity to become now acceptable to practice and participate in, it had to only be the texts that were by government and by certain church leaders approved. And all the other texts had to be destroyed. And again, the Roman government, is not going to choose those that oppose their values. And that's so certainly it's not going to support women and equality, even though this was one of Jesus's teachings and beliefs. And what we're also going to see is that what is going to be pushed away and meant to be destroyed are any versions of Christianity that illustrated one's own self-authority and knowledge. And those other versions of Christianity were the ones now that were going to be persecuted because they stood a threat to Roman life, politics, power, all these aspects that that people use to kind of that people use to control others, right? So we have that whole aspect going on, and then we've got gender biases going on in translations of the Christian text that we now know. So the Bible that most of us know is a translation from the 16th century. And this is an English interpretation of Latin text that was translated from Greek, that was information that was spoken in Hebrew. So play the game of telephone and you can see how some meaning is going to get lost here, right? So for instance, like the feminine qualities of the Holy Spirit, being that the Holy Spirit was feminine, was lost. People don't recognize that that there's a feminine aspect to the Holy Spirit because it was written out so that we wouldn't recognize that aspect. Or one of my favorite topics that I love to talk about is this whole notion of sin. And I say that because it has driven me crazy ever since I really understood the original meaning of sin, which is to miss the mark. So in other words, it's like, oh, you just fell out of alignment And we need to know when we're out of alignment to how to get back into alignment versus that there's something wrong with you, there's something to be ashamed about, there's something unworthy about you. All these ways that have really hurt our sense of self and our ability to trust ourselves, and because of these misinterpretations, these and interpretations perhaps that weren't accidental, that were meant to again evoke a sense of trying to control people rather than them know themselves and trust themselves. So thankfully, there were people smart enough to start writing down these other versions of Christianity. These are the versions of ancient Christianity that were supposed to be burned, and people recognize we have to preserve these somehow, and so they hid these forbidden texts, and they were deeply buried and protected and so forth, and they started to become discovered between the 18th and 20th centuries, right? Most notably was the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, discovered in 1896. And then the Nag Hammadi codexes discovered in 1945. And these really start to shed a light on the evidence of women in Christianity and the purposeful erasure of women as leaders and wisdom holders in their own right as Christians. So this to me is heartbreaking, because as we're going to see this invitation from Mary Magdalene to support us in our emotional growth, it's exactly because the way we were taught to see ourselves wasn't the wholeness of who we are, and it certainly wasn't an honoring of the divine feminine principles within all of us. And so our internal world and our emotional life is such a crucial part to how we honor the divine feminine within us, and how we will see through these ancient texts and what they're trying to share with us is about how we reclaim self-gnosis, inner knowing, and inner trust, and the power that creates from within. So it's really interesting to start to compare the authorized text of Christianity and the unauthorized text of Christianity, because the authorized text is this doctrine of belief. And it really is this sense of calling for obedience, and that others have spiritual authority over you. And you are innately damaged, especially because of Eve, of course, right? Eve was, she screwed us over, right? From the Garden of Paradise and living this life of paradise. But what I really feel is the intention of Eve is that if our whole point is to know ourselves, then we are being called to awaken to all aspects of our human selves, and that's not going to be pretty, in order to really step into the power and love that we are. So it's really recognizing that, sure, you can stay in this place of paradise and not have gnosis, not have understanding. So it's that sense of ignorance is bliss, right? And that's being exalted in authorized text, and that Eve did something wrong when really she was the one willing to listen. She was the one that's saying, I get that this other path is going to be harder, but this is the path that leads us to know the divinity within each of us. And so ignorance might be bliss, but you're not going to feel fulfilled. You're not going to feel that connection with the divine. And so this is the path to go. And so rather than this story of mistrust about women and why we have to be cautious of women and why you shouldn't trust yourself as a woman, think of it if we were told that Eve was the wise one. She was the one willing to make the difficult choice and step into what was necessary in order for us to know ourselves in completion and wholeness and love. That's not easy. That is not for the faint of heart, but that's why there is birth more and more of you strong, spiritual, sensitive, wise ones, because you are the ones that are meant to be the leaders in modeling this for other people. So back to the authorized text, obedience. There's something wrong with you. People have spiritual authority over you. And it's an exertion of control over others. And let's face it, it's predominantly men of the church, of government, who are going to exercise this control over you. And it's this power over framework that started 2,000 years ago, right? Versus the unauthorized text, which is providing us with a path to inner awakening. That you have, when you read these unauthorized texts, it's all about that you have self-authority. You have your own relationship to the divine that's intimate. And the whole point is to have this intimate relationship with the divine, so that when you miss the mark, aka sin, there is no punishment. You feel it within your heart. It does not feel right to you because you are so intimately connected with the divine that you naturally want to course correct, to go back to an expansive love state. So it's a relationship that guides you to your inner knowing and that aligns with your divinity. It is a power with and within framework. And that's what's been hidden from us. That was what was purposely destroyed. And what the non-authorized texts point us to is that we need both strengths and insights from both the divine feminine and the divine masculine in order to have self-gnosis or inner knowing. We need them both, and we need them both in balance. But because the feminine has been erased, we continue to experience great imbalances within ourselves that is impacting our mental and emotional wellness, as well as creating great imbalance in our world. I want to read to you from one of the non-sanctioned texts from the Gospel of Thomas. And it goes like this. Jesus said, "If those who lead you say to you, 'See, the kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside you and outside you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known, and you really will realize it is you who are the sons and daughters of the living source. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty." Whew, right? Like yeah, when I take that in, it's like, there's going to be others, these outer authorities kind of pointing you up here, pointing you down there, but we are meant to point within. And from within you, you will know the divine, and outside of you, and how you show up in the world and how you relate to others. And we need both to really go on this path of knowing and loving and understanding all aspects of ourselves and receiving all aspects of ourselves from love. So what I hear through this sacred text is so rich, and there's layers upon layers of the truth in learning to recognize that you are the divine. Plain and simple. You are the divine. The divine is within you and all around you. The more you are able to connect with your truth, the more connected you will feel to the living source of who you and others and all life are meant to be. And we're meant to be this in our expression of life through our lives. So when it comes to knowing ourselves, we must learn to bring forward the divine feminine strengths, which is the crucial ability to slow down and to go within the so-called darkness and remember our truth. And remember that this inward place that right now in society as it stands tells us we don't have time for, we need to be productive, we're too busy for, that this place of silence, this place of slowing down, this place of darkness within you, which is just fear and void, is for you to get to know so it doesn't control you. And this is a part of our feminine strength, to go within and slow down and listen. And then when we can utilize our divine masculine strength to integrate our inner knowing into the outer world, we stand boldly, courageously, knowingly in our power. And so it is the both and. We need both ways. We learn to deeply know ourselves, both internally and how we are showing up in our lives and with one another. That is how we gain self-gnosis. So I believe the unauthorized teachings of Mary Magdalene and Yeshua demonstrate a joint collaboration of support to one another and learning from one another. That certainly is not anywhere to be found in traditional text. She was there to support him in remembering and integrating the divine feminine, and he was there to support her in remembering and integrating the divine masculine. And that is what I believe the meaning of the crucifixion and resurrection of Yeshua is all about. It's not that he died for our sins because there's something innately wrong with us being human. The whole point of our human journey is to know ourselves and our divinity and to get to this inner knowingness within ourselves. And to get there, you will go through an inner crucifixion. And through that inner crucifixion, you will resurrect again. And this involves a process with our ego. And this is how it's tied to our emotional selves. We are being shown a way through the crucifixion and resurrection story of personal resurrection and salvation, with salvation's meaning being a deliverance from harm, from ruin or loss that occurs within ourselves. This pain, harm, loss occurs within ourselves when we don't know ourselves. That's when we feel that sense of separation from ourselves and from the divine. And so that Mary Magdalene was a crucial presence throughout Yeshua's crucifixion to hold him steady and stay the course of inner knowing when he was going through this transition from physical life to spiritual, to help him to resurrect to his purest state. That piece gets totally missed. But she was there holding him to remember his inner knowing in the way that is her feminine strength in being able to know this. Even when her life was threatened, even when he was afraid, even when she had to witness her beloved being tortured, she was willing to stay the course. And that part of our feminine strength does not get spoken about. But it reminds me of the mother bear, right? How we hear the mother bear who is willing to go at lengths for love and protection for those that we love. And this is the case of Mary Magdalene. So the crucifixion and resurrection then become a path laid out to us by Mary Magdalene and Yeshua on a way to knowing ourselves, which entails numerous unrelenting ego deaths that even feel close to physical death at times. And the reckoning. And what I mean by reckoning is that unpleasant circumstance that we have tried to avoid, that we have feared. That reckoning is here. It's right now. It's happening because we have been avoiding our emotions. We've been not shown how to tap into our divinity and our inner truth and knowing, and we're hurting within ourselves. We are hurting within ourselves. We are hurting one another. We are hurting the earth, and we are hurting life itself without this integration of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And this is not the way life is supposed to be. So there is this internal reckoning that needs to happen to make an external one. And the good news is that the divine feminine is resurrecting within us to remember our truth, our significance, our power, our strength that is needed now more than ever. If we want the world to change, we must first go on this path of inner knowing. This path begins with the feminine aspects of yourself. Again, regardless of gender, to turn inward, to learn, to know and love the guidance that is coming from within you, that largely speaks to us through our emotions, so that you can deeply know your truth and power. This is the process of annihilating many ego layers. And when we go through that process, that is our own inner crucifixion process, where your old self is left withering on a hook to die. And your psychological self does not know if it can survive that, but it can. And we are shown that we can. But we need that divine feminine inner strength to guide us there. And that is exactly the process that Mary Magdalene led me through, because the ego is tricky. The ego will hide these aspects of ourselves so that we don't have to experience the inner death, because who wants to experience that? And we think, I don't want to experience this. I would never wish this upon my worst enemy when you're going through it. And yet when you go on the other side, when you resurrect from it, you wish it for everyone to experience, because that expansiveness of love that you feel, the shedding of those layers of the ego uplift you. And it doesn't mean that you're ever done. I mean, to me, as long as we are here, we are continuing to go through that shedding, right? Just like a snake sheds its skin as it grows. Hopefully we are doing the same. But hopefully we don't have to go through such a deep inner crucifixion process to get there. You know, those dark nights of the soul can extend longer when we're going through these deeper crucifixions, inner crucifixions that we experience. So it's really understanding that when you go within with your divine inner feminine, and she leads you to the places that you don't want to look at, you don't want to see, and you have the strength to look at them, what you are really learning to do is receive all aspects of yourself. The good, the bad, the so-called ugly, right? The so-called bad. And by learning to receive this, you are gathering strength, you're gathering inner wisdom that you build upon internally, and then you call upon the divine masculine to support you to learn, how do I exalt this truth into the world? And so that I can contribute to greater love within my truth, as you were meant to, as we are each here to do. So the divine masculine, again, doesn't matter your gender, we all have a divine masculine aspect. The divine masculine within you becomes the foundation of your self-respect that teaches you how to stand and stand your ground and stand in the foundation of the truth of what you discovered through your divine feminine process. And that divine feminine foundation of internal strength allows you to become this external strength. And this is where we see as within, as without. So the divine feminine resurgence at this time is not just a spiritual calling. Again, I get why it's thought that way, but when we really get into the ancient text, there's a deeper invitation. It's an inner calling of your internal resources to expand and evolve. And I hope that together we will continue to heed these calls that whisper to us when we have the wisdom and strength to slow down, to go within. And my hope is that this podcast can be a source of support to remind you that this is a part of your strength, despite all these ways we are pulled to stay busy, to do this, to do that, and pull us away from our inner truth and inner knowing. So before I leave, I want to give a shout out to Kayleen Ospo. Because her research and understanding of these different early Christian texts was really supportive and helpful in my expanding of understanding and knowledge. So I'm going to include her information in the show notes if you want to check that out. As always, until next time, know that you are divine perfection and whole exactly as you are right now. And there is nothing to prove, just to remember.